Hi, this is my review of The Ruins of Azlant, Part 5, Tower of the Drowned Dead, by Ron Lundin. I was quite curious as to how the pacing of the adventure was going to change. The adventure path has handled different types of moods and actions throughout the entire story. First, you had some exploration. Later on, you had a lot of side quests, investigations, and combat, of course. So I was wondering how they would handle the pacing of the adventure in this particular part, and it's handled via a new school dungeon crawl. There is a particular structure here. A lot of it is underwater, and the characters have to go into it. They will end up in a demiplane even. Now, obviously this review is going to contain spoilers. I want to go into as much detail as I can as to how the entire adventure proceeds, so keep that in mind. Now, let's talk about the maps that you get with the adventure. They are quite beautiful. They represent the different encounter sites quite well, quite clearly. You can activate and deactivate the grid and the tags as well, so the maps are displayed in any way that you want. Even though some parts of the structure are completely submerged, they never look too blurry. Everything is clear. You can tell apart the furniture and the entranceways, the stairs. Everything is really clear, very easy for you to make sense of how the combats will proceed, and the traps and the items that the characters could find, treasures. The maps look perfect overall. Now let's talk about the quality of the adventure document itself. The quality is great. Everything is well written and organized. The document is fully bookmarked. The graphic design looks awesome as well. I think I only spotted one or two typos, but everything is very clear. Great organization, very easy for you to run the entire adventure. Now let's talk about the contents. After getting a brief introduction concerning the design process of the adventure and how it flows into the adventure path, the adventure begins right after the characters have discovered that Ohimwa, the main villain of Ruins of Azlant, is trying to get a hold of the information that Oberon, an undead lich from the Azlant Empire, has been keeping concerning weapons of ultimate destruction. These apocalyptic devices could be a great danger if they fall in the tentacles of Ohimwa. So the player characters decide to race to the hideout of Oberon, which is the Alabaster Trident, a huge trident-like structure, and most of it has been submerged after the cataclysm of the Earthfall. In the distant past, Ohimwa had managed to trick Oberon, disguising as a disciple, and Oberon fell for his tricks. However, Ohimwa didn't really gain too much concerning his long-term goals, so he had to abandon his facade as an apprentice of Oberon. But Oberon has hated Ohimwa since then and has taken great pains into fortifying the entire structure of the Alabaster Trident. Back when the Azlanti Empire was still up and running, Oberon was somewhat of a corporate climber. He basically took control of one of the great oracle structures, which is the Alabaster Trident, and he eliminated all opposition. He shaped the rooms and the creatures and the magic within the Alabaster Trident to suit his own image, his appearance, and his own designs. So back then you could consider him as sort of like a villain, and after the Earthfall he started to blame all of the aquatic races in a very pathological, nonsensical, and genocidal way. So part of the goals of Oberon are focused on taking his revenge on Ohimwa and destroying and torturing the different aquatic races such as elves and merfolk, etc. As the characters approach the Alabaster Trident, They can run into some nasty underwater encounters. It also depends how they wish to proceed towards the structure, but perhaps the most intriguing encounter is an encounter with Xochitl. Xochitl is sort of like a clockwork cephalopod. During this initial encounter, this strange clockwork creature is not too interested in interacting with the player characters. It will just attack them for a bit, and then it will speed off towards the alabaster trident, but still quite ominous of the encounters that will come if the characters keep venturing into the alabaster trident and the surrounding areas. The alabaster trident is divided by sections. Most of it is completely submerged, so the player characters, by now they are probably acclimated or accustomed to handling underwater encounters, but it's still important, perhaps even vital, for them to come adequately prepared with spells, magical items, and such. The upper part, which is the tines, this is basically the tip of the trident, and it looks a bit like an abattoir or slaughterhouse. It has been inhabited by scrags and marsh giants. They can actually pit one faction against the other or receive some sort of support if they handle things diplomatically. They do not trust each other very well. That is, the giants and the scrags just barely get along. There are also some mantis shrimps. So if the characters can find a way to take advantage of this enmity between the two types of groups, they could have an easier time. However, they shouldn't trust one of these sides. They will betray the player characters as soon as their objectives are met. So the player characters need to make their way down the alabaster trident. The alabaster trident was used as a center for oracular activities. It had many libraries and laboratories, and it has been empowered by its connection to a demiplane that enhances the divination capabilities of any sort of character versed in such an oracular discipline. The player characters will have to be careful. There are some traps that are highly dangerous. Some of them even cause insanity. And there are also shadows within this strange structure. Oberon has found a way to link these shadows to different clockwork devices and constructs so that those clockwork menaces serve as sort of like vehicles or hosts for the shadows. Oberon is so narcissistic that he has actually sculpted his appearance, his face, into many of these constructs, and he has modified almost all of the rooms in the structure to suit his own tastes in an aesthetics overshadows practicality sort of way. The player characters will also encounter more necromancy-based dangers, such as undead elves, and even nastier macabre threats will try to stop the player characters from going deeper into the alabaster trident. As the player characters go through the different rooms and cells, they may find some prisoners that they could help. In fact, one of those prisoners could be one of the non-player characters from the part 4 of the Ruins of Azlant. Even though the entire adventure path has a lot of freedom, it adapts quite easily to anything that the player characters decide to do. There are many tips and advice on how to handle radically off-the-rails type of situations. There is a good possibility that a friendly non-player character was captured in part 4. So the player characters will have a chance to rescue that non-player character in these cells, if they are careful, of course. They should also be really careful on how they move about and tinker with the different artifacts and objects in the laboratories and the different halls. There is a very interesting section of the place where there are cadavers connected to necromantic fluids. And if the player characters are just careless and start to remove the corpses without taking into account how they are connected to those fluids, they may actually get sprayed with some necromantic fluids and they may suffer some modifications to their own bodies. There are many clockwork golems that present real physical danger to the player characters, but there are also some unusual things, like for example carnivorous crystals. And of course there are some unusual ion stones. You may remember that the Azlanti Empire used a lot of ion stones through the spindle solution. have some peculiar powers. For example, in the case of the Pyramid Ironstone, it actually grants the Ghost Touch special ability. There are also some hauntings. Oberon enjoys torturing aquatic races, so if you're not careful, you could activate one of these hauntings and suffer some of the nasty effects from Oberon's interrogations. You can share the pain of the past, to put it in a way. There is a really ghastly room with a flayed aboleth. This macabre exhibition gives the player characters a pretty good idea on the mindset of Oberon. The party of adventurers could end up encountering Uluthan. Uluthan was once a spy for Ohimwa, but it was captured by Oberon and turned into a vampire. I actually like it that here they give an explanation on how Oberon was experimenting on Uluthan because he has that fixation on Ohimwa, on how he was tricked by this aboleth. Because in other fantasy adventures, I have seen some unusual vampiric creatures, but they do not give a satisfactory explanation as to how that creature turned into a vampire. But here you have details on the process on how Oberon took Uluthan and created a vampire aboleth. You can get some information from Uluthan because this aboleth is not very happy with its vampiric condition, but it's still under the power of Oberon, so do not expect things to go easily or smoothly. As the player characters go deeper into the Trident and enter the high halls, which are the more grand sections of the Trident, they will have some really unusual encounters because, for example, they will run into a clockwork familiar by the name of Valkrad. This clockwork familiar can become a steadfast ally. It is not very strong, so the party of adventurers better take care of this unusual familiar so that it doesn't get destroyed, and it's actually quite brave and courageous in battle. This mechanical marvel was abandoned by Oberon. It was created almost on a whim and then discarded, so they can get a long-term ally in Valkrad. The characters can also explore and search around in different workshops where the different clockwork mechanisms are created, and they can run into Xochitl once more. And this time, this clockwork monstrosity is not going to let them pass. It will give them a chance to turn back and abandon the Trident, but of course the player characters are not going to do that, so I think they will have a very exciting and epic battle against this clockwork guardian. If the player characters survive encounters with shadows both outside and inside different clockwork constructs, they will get to the portal that connects the Alabaster Trident with the Omen Dominion. And this is the demiplane that I was telling you about. It's all about divination. You have information on the entire demiplane, how normal gravity works inside the demiplane, how it's timeless. It seems like time almost stops completely. There are some exceptions, but for the most part it has that sense of timelessness. You have details on the shape of the plane, on how it affects divination magic, on how some creatures that have been living for a time inside the demiplane are prophecy-addled, and sometimes they cannot tell reality from prophecies. They could find different traps, most of them alarming Oberon of the character's presence. There are also a group of Cyclops that have been tortured and abused beyond sanity, so they are quite dangerous. They could also run into an assassin, Uncle Knives, that has been planning a way to take control over the entire demiplane. It had a purpose of assassinating one of the members of the Azlant Empire, but that task has been accomplished long ago. And because this demiplane is timeless, Uncle Knives has survived all that time, and it is plotting on how to take control of the demiplane, even if that means destroying Oberon. Once the player characters approach the lodging area within this demiplane, they will have to fight against clockwork mages. If the player characters survive that encounter, they will come face to face with Oberon the Lich. This is going to be a very difficult battle. Oberon has had centuries to polish his arcane craft, so it's not going to be easy. However, if Oberon feels cornered, he will propose an alliance with the player characters. He wants to see Ohimwa destroyed. And Ohimwa actually has stolen Oberon's phylactery. So Oberon will do everything that he can to help the player characters if they become his allies. They could ask him to stop his experiments on the aquatic races. However, even though Oberon could honor this promise, do not expect a very powerful and evil lich to keep his word after a long period of time. Oberon will give the player characters information concerning Ohimwa and the secret cache where the Spindle solution kept those very dangerous weapons to get to that place before Ohimwa. So it's going to be a delicate situation where the player characters have become tenuous allies with Oberon and they race against time to stop Ohimwa from getting its tentacles upon those apocalyptic devices. At the end of the document, you have information on the important non-player characters that appear in this adventure. All of their stats, their special powers and abilities, but also you have campaign setting information concerning the secrets of Azlant. This adds a lot of value to this document. You're going to find information on the places and the creatures and the beings and the cities that once were in Azlant and after the Earthfall. You have enough information to create mini campaigns or an entire campaign using any of these sites or a group of them to come up with some interesting stories, even on an epic scale. Because, for example, you have places such as the City of Golden Gates, that is the High City and the Low City as well. You also have information on the Towers of Heaven. You have information on different Azlanti splinter factions and how they went into different sites to carry out their plans. You even have maps of these different sites. So this adventure has some potential to expand in different ways, perhaps handle some spin-off type of situations. And of course, at the very end of this document, you have an entire bestiary with encounter tables, with all of the different creatures that you can find in this adventure and you could use in all sorts of encounters, especially aquatic encounters. So what do I think of this part 5 of the Ruins of Azlant? I really like it how they changed the pace once again. I like how all the entire Ruins of Azlant adventure path has moments of exploration, investigation, interaction and side quests. And then you have this new school dungeon crawl, quite dangerous, with many high fantasy moments. Considering the destructive potential of the secrets of the Azlanti Empire and the machinations of Ohimwa, you never feel like this is something somewhat ordinary or inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. The player characters feel like harbingers that something is to come, and if they remain passive, everything that they know could be changed dramatically for the worse. I think Oberon is a great villain, and his presence is felt through the entire navigation process as the characters travel down the Alabaster Trident. And I think that moment at the end, where the player characters may actually consider joining forces with Oberon, is going to make for some really interesting role-playing opportunities, but also some strategies and tactics as to how they will handle the situation, especially in the final part of the Ruins of Azlant, that is part 6, that I will review in a few weeks. So I hope that you will join me in my review of this climax of the Ruins of Azlant. Well, thanks for watching my review. Remember to check out the links in the description below if you haven't seen my reviews of the other parts of the Ruins of Azlant. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.